Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be analyzing the natal chart of Shia LaBeouf. And obviously, if you guys are tuned into the news, there's a lot going on with him right now. He's been involved in some legal stuff in New Orleans. I didn't know that much about him as an actor or his past, but apparently um, he has he does have a bit of a history of this in terms of things like battery or just kind of um, yeah, I'm not sure. He's never been convicted of like a major crime, but there's obviously some alarming stuff going on. Um, I'm just going to start off by saying this hands down. This is an incredibly rough chart. It is more difficult than most of the charts we've looked at so far. I see this as a person with extreme polarization. He is very, very internally conflicted, and he's coming into this life cycle with a lot of unfinished business that he's going to be called to course correct. Before I go further, I also want to name something really important. So, this seems to be a person who has really struggled with addiction. And in my mind, that sets this case apart from others I've covered on this channel that reflect more entrenched pathological behavior. So while this is definitely someone who has done some bad shit, I just want to name that, he's struggling, or he seems to be struggling with a pretty rampant addiction, and he desperately needs help. I think that with that help, he could have the ability to really turn his life around and change. Whereas many of the people whose charts I've featured on this channel, that would not necessarily be the case. We do have a verified birth time for him, so that's great. That means I can really do a deep dive and go all out, talk about the houses, and really, really get in here, help you guys really get down to this guy's psychological makeup and what is going on for him. So the first part of this video, I'm going to just be focusing on the planets in his natal chart and what is going on for him, why this is such a difficult chart. And then I am going to bring you guys through what's going on for him right now in the transits, because there's a lot going on, and what I potentially see for him based on the transits that are at play for him right now and that are going to be happening over the course of the year. So, in terms of looking at his natal chart in general, first of all, his ascendant is at 29 degrees of Aquarius. So 29 degrees, this tells me that his soul feels that it's urgent to really get something right in this lifetime, which is going to be a major theme throughout this chart, by the way. Because he's a rising Aquarius, his chart co-rulers are Uranus in Sagittarius in the 10th house and Saturn in Sagittarius in the 9th house. So to me, what I'm interpreting from this is there is some kind of lesson he needs to learn about having both freedom and a sense of responsibility and accountability. Right now, it is quite possible that he has a moral sense of superiority, and then Uranus in the 10th, could obviously cause chaos out in the world for everyone to see, sudden shifts in terms of his public persona. So he's definitely achieving the goal of being seen as radical and unconventional, but it's in a fashion that is completely out of control, and it's destabilizing for him and for the community. So I see him as having come into this lifetime with a desperate calling to be true to himself, to be an Aquarius in nature, but to be grounded in that truth and to learn how to express his beliefs in a mature and more humane way. So that's just to get things started. Now, from an evolutionary astrology perspective, he has a nodal grand square. I'm going to take you guys through what that means. But with a nodal grand square, he's going to constantly feel stuck and at a crossroads until he can learn whatever lesson he is meant to learn in this lifetime. So his nodal grand square involves North Node in Aries. This is making a square to Venus in Cancer. Venus is also making a square to the South Node in Libra. And then this is making a square to Mars in Capricorn. So if you see here, it's like the configuration is like this. That's why they call it a grand square, grand nodal square in this case. And then, of course, there's an opposition between Mars and Venus, which is super important, and I'm definitely going to go into that. So first of all of this is cardinal energy, which is also important because this means that this is a person who's really likely going to evolve through constant pressure and confrontation. So their life is a bit like a treadmill that never turns off. Or you could think of it like they're at a four-way intersection with no stoplight. They're constantly being forced to decide which way to go, when to assert themselves, and when to risk getting into an accident. If they stop moving or making choices, they fall behind. So growth is really going to only happen through constant action. Cardinal energy means, you're going at a fairly fast pace, and it's a linear path. As opposed to mutable energy, which means it's more you're here, then you're over there. It's more of a zigzag. Whereas fixed energy means you're just staying in one spot. So the North Node in Aries in the second house to me means that he needs to develop value and self-confidence. He needs to develop value in himself. We often think of the second house as the house of money and resources. It's really also about how you value yourself, your self-esteem. So he needs to become more self-sufficient, especially because it's Aries. And he needs to develop an inner confidence, I'm seeing. Whereas with South Node in Libra in the eighth, it seems like there are some themes around old patterns of being tied up with others for power or approval. Interestingly, this reminds me of the chart we just did on Prince Andrew. Um, and by the way, this is a very different chart than his, but just this in particular kind of reminds me of that. Um, so in this lifetime, there is some lesson to be learned here about building self-worth and creating his own power, his own resources without depending on those around him. So integrating this information with a cardinal nodal square, it's like this is someone who keeps having the safety net pulled out from underneath him. And I think life keeps telling him or trying to teach him, you don't get to fall back on others. You need to learn how to stand on your own 2 feet. Again, because this chart is so difficult, I think it's going to be a pretty hard lesson for him to learn. Now, I want to talk about this Mars-Venus opposition here before I put this together with the nodes. So like I said in the beginning, I see him as a very polarized person. He has needs and wants that are extremely opposite of each other. So let's talk about this first one. So Venus-Mars opposition alone means that what someone wants and what someone does to get what they want is pulling them into opposite directions. And this can lead to someone who has a very intense aura. It's almost like they walk around with a charged battery on their back. So this person could have a primal magnetism about him. They could definitely send mixed signals without meaning to, and they may tend to attract people without even being consciously aware that they're doing it. So it's interesting because I think I saw in the media that his last fight he said it was about 3 men touching his leg or something like that, which was offensive to him. And I was thinking that this could actually very likely be a manifestation of this energy playing out. So this is a person who could also attract very intense relationships, and he's going to over-identify with either planet. The goal when you have an opposition in your natal chart is to eventually come to the middle and find a compromise, how to work with the energy in a way that both planets are getting their needs met. But until he can learn that, he's going to kind of swing between two sides of the opposition or primarily be on one side or the other. Um, and so if he's over identifying with the Mars, he's going to come across as quite impulsive, very reactive. He could have a very high sex drive. Or if he's over identifying with Venus, he could seek a lot of approval. He could become more passive and he could become overly reliant on others. The ironic thing is that he has Leo on his descendant. And of course, it's 29 Leo because this is the ascendant is 29 Aquarius. So I feel like he's going to constantly be drawn to people who mirror him in some way. So when he is in a relationship or I don't know, even in like a casual kind of relationship, I feel like whoever he's reacting to is actually kind of like his image reflected back at him, which could cause all types of problems, especially with someone with this chart. Now, his sun, of course, is ruling the descendant because sun rules Leo. The sun is in the fourth house in Gemini conjunct Chiron, which means that he likely has very early psychological wounds related to not being able to be himself. So, really not being able to have a voice or around feeling very misunderstood because it's in Gemini, Chiron is. Um, so this is someone who could have spent their childhood feeling very unseen, very alone. And when you have Sun conjunct Chiron, you are the wound. Like in Lucy Letby's video, she had Sun opposing Chiron, and I talked about how I felt like she could have had all sorts of defense mechanisms in place for, not getting in touch with that wound. It's like, the wound is over there, I'm over here. But in this case, when you have Sun conjunct Chiron, it is so painful because it's like your identity is tied up with the wound. So and it's in the fourth house, the house of home and family. So there's something about very, very early wounding in his family or at home, his parents, um, that is really affecting his identity. And my guess is that there's a lot of shame around who he really is, his core identity. I think that this could be why he is so drawn to acting. I think he started even, acting as a kid or a teenager, and I bet this is partly why, because this is someone who longs to express himself. He has two planets in Leo, or I'm sorry, he has two planets in the fifth house. He actually has no, well, he has the moon in Leo. That's a whole nother thing that I'm going to go into. But yeah, he has his moon in Leo. He has two planets in the fifth house, which is a Leo house. This is someone who wants to shine. This is someone who actually longs to express himself. But I don't think that he feels that it's safe to do that. So he found a clever and creative outlet to express himself through acting and embodying a character. And this fits very nicely with Gemini because he's not just playing one person now, he's playing two. He has two identities. So he has his own core identity, which again, I feel like is probably not going to feel safe for him to really express. And then he has the identity that he's playing, that he's, putting on as a character in whatever movie or TV show he stars in. Um, Also, with Leo on the descendant, he's going to gravitate towards people who express themselves freely, which does represent a part of him that has probably been very, very constrained. And this could really intrigue him and fascinate him when he finds people like that, but it could also really provoke him or trigger old wounds. So it's going to be a little bit like that saying, when you point the finger at someone else, there are three fingers pointing back at you. I don't know if that makes sense to people, but basically he has all of these wounds. He's not going to feel comfortable to express his authentic self, but he's going to he's going to be drawn towards people who are very expressive, and it's basically just going to trigger a lot of psychological stuff for him. And while he's going to maybe lash out at them for that or have big feelings, yeah, I mean, in some ways, it's about the persona they're putting across. It's about what they're bringing into the relationship, but it also has a lot to do with him. So I hope that makes sense. So Venus, let's just talk about Venus in Cancer in the fifth house. This could be a very difficult placement for Venus if it does not get what it needs. So I would think this is someone who could feel incredibly lonely if they don't feel loved or seen by others. Again, I think this is that why he got into acting, because he found this clever way to be seen in a way that did not actually reveal his true self. So there's such a longing to be loved, to be seen as special, to be seen as chosen. He does have his moon in Leo as well, which complicates this further. I'm going to talk about it later. But with his Venus in Cancer, what is going to make this person feel okay, or at least this part of him feel okay, is if he's just kind of adored. Now, this is, of course, opposing Mars in Capricorn in the 11th. And so Mars in Capricorn is going to say, don't just stand there basking in the sunlight and waiting to be adored. Go out and do something. Interact with the community, break the mold, go on an adventure. You're going to feel better about yourself if you accomplish something. So, whereas Venus says you are important if you are just loved, and that is enough, or you feel loved, and that is enough, his Mars is telling him you'll only matter because of what you do and what you achieve in this lifetime. And of course, his sun is directly opposing Uranus. And again, remember, this is Sun conjunct Chiron. So that also means this is someone who can be quite eccentric. So this is someone who's really not going to want to be tied down. So just remember that we have that going on, and that is adding another layer to this opposition here between Venus and Mars. So again, like I said, because this is an opposition, he can't have both. And he needs to find a compromise between the two planets, but he's likely going to swing between both sides of it. And so we can see how different these two planets are in terms of what they want for him. Also, when you have an opposition, it can be very, very common to project the energy of one of the planets onto another person. So either this person feels completely alone, or they feel smothered, especially if he's on the side of Mars. He's going to, which I think is more likely the case a lot of the time, because he does have this um, Sun opposing Uranus here, which means he's really going to be craving space. He's really going to want the space to be completely free to do whatever he wants. So, if he's on the side, I would imagine when he starts out in a relationship, he could be more on the side of Venus, like, look at me, love me, please love me. But then as things progress, he kind of goes on to more of the Mars side of things. And he's going to perceive that the other person is Venus, and then he's going to feel smothered and overwhelmed by the connection potentially, and feel even more of this urge to split off and to be by himself. So I would think it would be quite hard to be in a relationship with this person until they have mastered this aspect. And by the way, I don't want to make it sound like I'm generalizing when I say I think that the further into the relationship he gets, he's going to be Mars. I do think it's possible he could continue to kind of flip between the two sides. This could be like a classic, anxious avoidant attachment cycle where like you lean out, the other person leans in, you lean out, but then they lean out. So then he's going to become Venus again. He's going to lean in, but then they lean back in and he leans out. So I also think that is a possible manifestation of this energy. Okay, so going back to the nodes, being that both um, Mars and Venus are scoring the nodes, and the fact that Mars rules the North Node, Venus in Cancer, well, it doesn't matter what sign it's in, but Venus rules the South Node because it's in Libra. To me, this means there is such an importance here for him to really get whatever he needs to learn right in this lifetime. And when you have planets squaring the nodes, there is some kind of blockage that is preventing you from reaching your North Node, your life path. It requires that you change the way that you use the energy of those planets in order to fulfill your destiny. So, since his North Node is about finding his way, his independence when it comes to valuing himself, providing for himself, nurturing himself, he's going to have to find, again, a compromise with this opposition, which for me means he's going to have to learn to get comfortable with his need for connection, to be seen, and he's going to have to make relationship choices that are aligned with growth, not just based on chemistry. He's also going to have to stop projecting either planet onto other people. So obviously, very difficult tasks. I will say this, I think if he can get into a good recovery program, he has an opportunity to start to build a foundation towards getting there. And I'm not saying that everyone with addiction issues needs a program. I think many people do. But this is one of the avenues I think that he could take towards being able to fulfill what is going to be a very difficult task for him. Adding on to this challenge, Pluto is conjunct South Node, and it is then opposing the North Node. So we've seen this quite a bit in my videos. I am going to talk about this, but first I'm going to talk about the fact that his moon, actually I'm going to erase all this. His moon is in Leo, and this is making a square to Pluto. Now, Moon making a square to Pluto is really up there in my mind with one of the toughest aspects you could have in your natal chart. And I'm thinking that this is one of the aspects that gets him into trouble with his addictions. So I will just say this, whenever someone has Pluto in hard aspect to the moon, I wonder about issues with their mother. There's a really great book called The Hades Moon by Judy Hall, where she really talks about Pluto making aspects to the moon in someone's natal chart. And there's a lot she talks about having to do with that person's relationship with their mother. And I'm quoting her here. She says that mothers reflected in the Leo moon may set very high standards for their children, and their insistence on their child living up to these standards leaves no room for self-expression. So this correlates with what I said, what I was talking about before with his Sun conjunct Chiron in the first house, or the fourth house. On the other hand, she writes, The mother in this aspect may overindulge a child, and this she refers to as the chosen child syndrome, where they are seen as so special that they find they can never actually live up to their mother's expectations. So that is interesting. So with Pluto conjunct the South Node, um, to me, this is very remarkable in this chart because Pluto is not only in its rulership, it's in a Plutonian house, it's in the eighth house. So we know that this is a person who is highly familiar with Plutonian themes from past lives. So to me, Pluto conjunct his South Node represents that he keeps trying to master and control old habits. And even though he is in this lifetime to have a real transformation, because again, with when you have Pluto conjunct South Node opposing North Node, this signifies that for me, there's an urgency to finally get something right this time. He's going to have to let go of old power strategies. He's going to have to release control. This could also be manifesting in addictions for him that are super hard to let go of because he could be coming into this lifetime repeating destructive cycles. So this is a very karmic aspect. And this also means something quite extreme may have to happen in order for him to reach the North Node, because he could have a very hard time letting go, especially with Pluto conjunct South Node. Okay, so now I'm going to put up the transits, and these are today's transits. So I did this just a while ago. Okay, so what is going on for him right now? Why has he resurfaced? Why is he back in the news doing all sorts of destructive things? Well, pretty much all of the outer planets are making major aspects here to his natal chart. I don't even have to look at his progressions because there's so much that I'm seeing right here that spells things out very, very clearly. So first of all, transiting Pluto it's going through his 12th house. This is making a square to his natal Pluto. And because the 12th house is the house of self-undoing, this may in particular represent psychological breakdowns, could represent psychological breakthroughs. It could also represent secrets coming to light. And that is exactly what is happening right now. I mean, he's psychologically unraveling in front of the world. Now, because it's a square, that means that there is friction happening with Pluto. And it's meant to create transformation. So this happens for everyone transiting Pluto, making a square to natal Pluto. This happens for everyone in their late 30s to early 40s. And it can represent a time of possible identity crisis. But Pluto, transiting Pluto is a fairly long transit. And its goal ultimately is to help force someone to reckon with what they need to let go of in order to transform. It's not abrupt and swift like Uranus, although I have to say it can be if the person does not listen to the universe. So it can take a while to manifest because Pluto square Pluto can send repeated messages to a person, almost like repeated warning signals and alarm bells. This is why I think we've seen kind of a slow unraveling of Shia, because Pluto is trying to teach him a lesson, but he also needs to be willing to really hear it. Another thing that is not great for him here is that Pluto rules his ninth house in Scorpio, and so obviously he's breaking the law now. He's being forced to confront his behaviors in court. And so this to me means more legal actions could take place. They already are, I imagine, and he may have to even serve time If he keeps going the way he is. He also has Saturn in the ninth house, which is not great. To me, this means, if he gets sued or he goes on trial, he's probably not going to win. Um, so his moon, like we talked about, his natal moon's at 1 degree of Leo. So this is making a trine right now to Neptune conjunct Saturn. Oh, I see. Saturn is now in 2 degrees of Aries. Okay. So this also shows up in his first house. It looks like it's showing up in the second, but his second house starts at 12 degrees of Aries. So this is traveling. It's almost near the end of his first house. So I feel like because it's a trine, that's a much more supportive aspect. There is something here about helping him to finally see himself for who he really is. Again, first house identity. Um, like I said, because it's a trine, this is a much easier aspect than a square. It tells me that he may be more aware than we know that something big needs to change for him. He can't keep going like this. Now, what's even more fascinating about this trine is that the planets involved have to do with Venus opposing Mars in this case. Why do I say that? Because the moon rules his fifth house, where Venus is placed, right? Saturn co-rules his 11th house, where the Mars is. And Neptune rules part of his first house, the Pisces that it's actually intercepted. So this tells me even more that this trine is supposed to be helping him to be coming to a sober realization about his relational patterns and the identity he has built for himself not working for him. I don't know what's going on with his relationships right now. I think I read he was married or uh he was involved with someone and they have a child together. Um, but does anyone know if he just went through a breakup of some sorts? In any case, this trine is giving him a real opportunity because I do think there is at least a part of him that's realizing here that he needs to grow up. He cannot continue to do things his way. Another difficult transit he has right now is that he has Uranus, transiting Uranus. How do I get this out of the way? Um, Making us or approaching a square to his nodes. Sorry, not his nodes, his ascendant and his descendant. Because this is at 27 Taurus, this is at 29 Leo and Aquarius. So Uranus has already made a pass once, it's going to make a pass again, involving a square. So yeah, like I said, Uranus was already making an exact square before. So last year, which means he could have been through a difficult or very shocking breakup. The other thing that could be happening, and this might be a real concern actually, is that Uranus squaring the ascendant and descendant could mean that someone really wants to break free. So this could absolutely be a period where we see that he wants to make abrupt decisions, perhaps about cutting people off in his life. Now, if these are negative influences, obviously that's good, but he may also be cutting ties with healthier people who care about him. And this may be a period for him where he is more of a rebel rouser than anything else, which in my mind does not bode well for this trine, nor does it bode well for the square, because these transits are really trying to teach him that he needs to change and transform himself. Um, Now, I will say he could use the energy of Uranus squaring his ascendant and descendant as a way to break unhealthy patterns or free himself of old dynamics, which would be much better for him, obviously. Now, I think that when we are likely to see something really major happen, like things suddenly click or he makes a big decision that is life-changing, I think it may come down to this Chiron approaching a conjunction to this North Node. Whoops. So this is going to start happening in May because Chiron toggles back and forth like many of the outer planets. So this is going to start happening in May, and then it'll be sitting on his North Node until June. Then it's going to move forward, but then it'll move back towards his North Node again later this year in November, and then again in March of next year. So when Chiron sits on someone's North Node, this may signify that there will be an unbearable event that pushes him, forces him towards learning a life lesson. In other words, a karmic lesson becomes unavoidable. He cannot bypass it any longer. So something really, really major could be happening to him that really marks a pivotal point in his life to where he cannot go back. Um, Hopefully, for his sake, I'm hoping this could lead to some sort of recovery or spiritual growth. That is very possible with Chiron sitting on the North Node. Um, and it is in Aries, which means he could really feel inspired to start fresh, begin something new for the purpose of transforming his self-identity. So yeah, very, very difficult chart, a lot of difficult obstacles going on for him, but I do think that he's going through, I mean, someone with this chart is constantly going through a crossroads, but I think specifically with the transits he's going through right now, there's really more, even more of a crossroads that he's at. And I think that it's possible he could really be pushed at some point this year towards some major pivotal event happening for him. Again, hopefully it's towards his recovery. So I hope that you guys enjoyed the reading of his chart and me going over the transits. If you're a Shia LaBeouf fan, maybe this helps you understand him more, or this helps you understand why he is acting out right now. Like I said, I don't know much about him. I've seen him in like maybe one or two films. So, I've caught a couple of things in the media that are going on for him right now, but otherwise I don't know much about him. So this was really fascinating for me to do the chart. I learned a lot. I hope you guys learned a lot too. If you have made it this far, thank you so much for watching. If you're new to the channel, you're into true crime, and you're into astrology, or you want to learn astrology, please click like and subscribe. Let me know who else you would like me to do in true crime as far as video. And as always, thank you so much for watching.